Welcome to Passion to Poison, the podcast that explores life's transitions. I'm Russ Tanner, and I'm here as always with my co-host, Mac Wilson. And today on the podcast, we have Josh Penrod.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, Josh, for joining us. So Josh is somebody that I've known going on, 25 years. I met Josh. His team beat us in the CIF playoffs in 2019, first round, and just absolutely destroyed our team of misfits from the high desert in California. And I remember talking with Josh after the game, and he was just the coolest, nicest guy, and his same with his twin brother Joe. And then ended up playing with him in college and getting to know him better, and then have stayed in touch with him a lot over the years, and really glad to have Josh on. I love his background and story, and thought that it would be really relevant to the topics that we want to discuss here, especially Josh's transition from playing in college to the workforce, and the great work that he's done at the companies that he's been with. But with that intro, Josh, feel free to jump in wherever you think is relevant. We'd love to hear some of your background and history from your perspective, and hope you're not bothered if we jump in and ask a few questions along the way.
No, please do. And thanks for the intro. And I would probably clarify that when we beat Mac's team, I think Mac was 12 and 6'5". But so, yeah, thanks for having me on. You grew up in Southern California, have an identical twin brother. He's actually how I got into playing volleyball. I had started off playing basketball, and honestly, mostly because I was very tall for my age, and it seemed like it was like kind of embarrassing to be that tall and not play basketball was probably my prime motivation. So I wasn't really that I mean, I like to play sports, I like to play pickup ball, but I wasn't that into it. And in ninth grade, I decided I'd try out for the team, and so I started playing basketball. And then Joe had gotten into volleyball, and so I decided to try out for the volleyball team as well, and kept playing. So played those sports through high school and ended up getting recruited and playing volleyball in college. I was a mediocre player who was very happy to be on just an absolutely world-class team. So that was a great experience. Going back to, I guess, since the whole theme here is transitions, I was just kind of thinking through my life and like the big transitions I had. And I would say, a couple of them prior to playing volleyball in college. When I was in high school, 10th grade, my mom got very ill and was just kind of out of the picture at that point. And so horrible thing. If I had a time machine, I would go back and change it. But that said, I think it was just a very formative and frankly positive thing for me to go through that. And learn, at that age that you just kind of have to keep going through, and to learn how the way that you look at those things really impacts how you experience them. And so I ended up feeling like it made me stronger. I felt like I was left to my own devices, and this is probably a theme throughout my life, that like I was left to my own devices to figure things out, and I realized I could. And I carried that on through my whole life, as just that confidence that this is hard. I don't know what I'm doing, but if I keep going, I put in the effort, I can figure it out and come out on the other end. And so, basically all of life was left to me to figure out at that age, and probably even earlier, that we had a pretty hands-off childhood. So handling, just taking care of yourself and making meals and washing clothes and all of that was a normal part of my life. But handling my college recruiting and applying to college and all those decisions, I was just entirely left to my own devices. And yeah, instead of feeling like it was like I lacked support, it actually felt like I had a lot of autonomy. And ended up going to BYU on a volleyball scholarship and played volleyball there for a few years. Freshman year, I think I came in hot. I had really did well that freshman year, and the coach Carl McGowan, who was incredible, told me that I had made the traveling team as a true freshman, but because I was going to serve an LDS mission, that they were going to redshirt me anyway, which was fine. I kind of expected that. I served an LDS mission in Venezuela, which was, again, a lot of perspective on life gained very quickly. And then I came back and played for a couple more years. But I realized when I was playing that I was just talking with my wife about this. I actually have a journal entry. I've always been pretty good about keeping a journal, but I had written this out. I had fallen behind, or I was behind on some skills. In the front row, I was a middle blocker, and in the front row, I was really a good hitter and a really good blocker, but I had no back row game whatsoever. And, I had kind of come up at a time playing where that wasn't as big of a deal. But my serve wasn't, jump serve was terrible. I didn't have a good back row attack, and I was a black hole on defense in the back row. And those are things I had to fix if I wanted to excel. And I literally have this journal entry where completely self-aware of this, and I'm like, okay, well, these are things you suck at. These are the things you're good at. And I fully believed that I could get good at those things. But I knew that it would take an incredible amount of work. And so it's like, Josh, if you want to do this, you got to be the first person to practice, the last person to leave. You're going to have to put in extra reps on all of these things. And then you can do it. And then I thought about it and thought, I don't know that I want to. And I don't think this is my future. Where was I going to go with that? And I kind of could see this future of if I put in this superhuman effort, I could probably stretch this thing out and maybe make a very mediocre career out of it for a while. And that was exciting because it was my identity. That was definitely appealing. I downplay it now, but it was super appealing to me because that was my identity and it was super cool. But I just had that moment where I thought it's just not really my future. And so I walked away and quit playing volleyball and decided to focus. I was getting married also, which is what you do as a 21-year-old Mormon at BYU, which seems insane when I look back at that, but very glad that as a dumb 21-year-old, I made that decision. So, but yeah, I decided I was going to focus on school and, getting married and my career. And so I walked away from volleyball and just very abruptly made that transition. I kind of decided right before the season started and called up the coach and he was like, "What are you talking about?" And that was that.
So in my own life, when I've had to make decisions at times, I've struggled because I'll get really anxious about, is this the right thing to do? And then I just won't do something. I'll just kind of go back and forth for a while until I kind of get to a breaking point where I just feel so overwhelmed that I have to make a decision that I finally do it. Do you find in your life that's how things are for you? Or is it more kind of an intellectual process and you just, okay, that makes sense. I'm going down that path. Or is it more of an emotional roller coaster that you're on?
Probably more the intellectual side. Definitely I earlier in my life, I would those kinds of feelings. I would just be like, nope, I don't have those. And I would, I'd go into robot Josh and just be like, nope, I'm not going to be negatively affected by these emotions. Boom, I'm just going to do it. And I would try to develop just this kind of over the top self-confidence and belief that I'm just going to do this and I can do this and I'm not going to be nervous about it. But it was definitely suppressing those actual emotions. And so it's at this stage of my life, I kind of have this rule where I'm like, just be a human and experience that emotion for a bit and recognize that you have it and it's real. And when it stops being useful, you can kind of go back into that other mode and set it aside, right? And so now, like, if I have some big thing, like a, event that I'm speaking at and I feel nervous about it, I let myself for a little bit. And then I kind of go like, okay, that's enough feeling nervous. Now we're going to act. Back then, I think I just entirely suppressed a lot of those feelings, which I don't believe was like a super healthy approach. And so it was a difficult decision, but there wasn't a ton of emotional turmoil. It was just kind of like, this adds up. This is the right move. I also had chronic knee injury. Like, my knees were a nightmare. And I just really kind of felt like I'm doing permanent damage to my knees for something that's probably not my future. And that helped make that decision. But what I'll tell you is I made that decision kind of like logic. This is the right thing. No looking back. Let's do it. And it was so horrible and emotionally, like, just awful for months afterwards.
Interesting. You said you have a twin. Is he like you, or are you guys different in that way?
We are identical twins. And we're identical in a lot of ways. And so, we don't approach everything exactly the same, but similarly enough that, yeah, we approach those things in basically the same way. So I walked away from that. I was very depressed for a couple of months, maybe more, right? Like maybe 6 months, where it was kind of off and on. But the loss of identity was huge. I just kind of didn't know who I was at that point. I think it felt like a loss of status because it was pretty cool to be on the volleyball team. And also, honestly, I think maybe one of the biggest factors was I had been in this like super structured thing where I was doing hours of intense exercise every day with people that I liked. And then I just went to a desk job. And I just didn't have a replacement for that degree of exercise. And I think, honestly, it just kind of threw me out of whack to transition that hard. And so it was a tough time for me, even though I really did believe I had done the right thing. It just took a while of, persevering with that to reconcile it and be okay with it. After that, I needed to get a job, and the internet, I'm old. The internet at the time was pretty new, and I was fascinated by it, and I just saw it as like the future. And it's funny to think back and like imagine some of the conversations I had with people back then where people are like, no one is ever buying anything online. That's just not going to happen. But that wasn't like some, crackpot, like Luddite view. That was pretty common that people were like, no, what? You're not going to buy shoes online. You have to try them on. You're not going to buy whatever. And I just completely thought, yeah, you are. You're going to do all that stuff online. And I was excited about it. And I had brothers that were involved with tech companies. And so I applied for a job as a web developer on campus at BYU. I had absolutely no experience whatsoever. I went into a job interview with Charles Cranny, who is an amazing man who ran an on-campus design agency. And I have no idea, other than, you guys both know what the competitiveness that comes from being so immersed in sports at that level. I think that just gave me this idea that I could go in and apply for this job and get it, even though I literally barely knew how to turn on a computer. And so I went into a job interview, and he asked me, all the stuff of, did I know these technologies? Do you know HTML? Do you know CSS? Do you know JavaScript? And I was just like, no, I don't know any of that. What about Photoshop? What about Illustrator? And I was like, nope, nothing. And I realized I was not getting the job. And he said something like, so it sounds like we'd have to invest an enormous amount of training in you. And which I think was his way of saying, you're crazy. Why did you waste my time? And I said, yeah, but I'm going to learn this faster than anyone you've ever seen, and it's going to be well worth it for you. And he just kind of chuckled and sent me on my way. And I walked out of there, and that competitive piece of my brain, and I was like, oh yeah, and I just got into this mode of like, oh, I'm going to show this guy, which he wasn't feeling that way at all. But I was just like, I'm going to show this guy, I'm going to do it. And I went right to the bookstore, and I bought a couple books on web development, and I spent the whole weekend just learning to do it. Like just literally every minute of, it was like an interview on a Thursday, and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. That's all I did. And my master plan was to call this guy back up on Monday and tell him, you should have hired me. I learned how to do it on my own over the weekend, which was a dumb plan. And luckily I didn't do that. And he called me that next week and said, hey, we have another opening. It's slightly less technical. Would you like to come back in and talk to me again? And I said, yeah. And when I came in, I just said, hey, before we get started, do you want to see all the websites I made since we spoke last week? And he said, sure. And I showed him the websites, and he said, well, you're hired. And so that's how I got started in my career on the web. I did that for probably 6 to 9 months, something like that. And then I went to go do an internship over Christmas break with a startup in California, where people I knew worked. I had like literally 2 of my brothers and Jesse Gant, who was an incredible setter at BYU, worked there. And I just went to do an internship and kind of see how things worked at a real company. And the second day of the internship, the CEO offered me a full-time job, and I dropped out of college and joined a startup. And did that during for about a year, and then the dot-com bubble burst, and all of those companies, they were all terrible companies. I can see why people were skeptical. There were no business model associated. But that burst, and I had the chance to. I had other job offers in California to keep doing tech, but I decided to go back and finish my degree, and went back to BYU and finished a degree in psychology. Thinking I was probably going to be a therapist, but then now realized I really wanted to work in technology. And so I worked in, I adjusted my major so that I was taking things that were more related to what I was interested in, like human sensation and perception and cognition and research design and behavioral psychology, and did all that with the eye to applying those to a tech career, and graduated and ended up getting hired, worked for BYU for a while, and then I ended up getting hired by Ancestry.com, which at the time was myfamily.com, and had just laid off like almost the entire company. I think I was like the first person they hired after like they had laid off everybody, and started there as a junior web developer.
Hey, Josh, on that, I would like to hear a little bit more on, to take a little bit of a step back on your experience, not so much all the details on Venezuela, but I mean, maybe just a little bit on the emotional and mental strain. I mean, I think a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, you go to serve a mission and it's kind of a retreat type of a thing. But just a little bit of that in the formative experience that it was, because, from our conversations, it's kind of like you have to. It's a huge challenge, and it really changes your perception on what you're actually capable of. And you talk about Southern California being on your own in a way, but in a lot of ways, when you go on a mission, you are on your own in a lot of ways. So maybe just before you jump into that, I love hearing your stories about your time in Venezuela.
Yeah. So you with an LDS mission, you don't decide where you're going, but man, did I want to go somewhere crazy. Like I don't know why. Like I don't know that like if I take a personality test that like an intense desire for adventure and risk is like that high of a personality trait of mine. But on the mission, I really wanted to go somewhere crazy. That's just how I was thinking about it. And I opened this mission call, and it was like, Maracaibo. Yeah. I didn't even know where it was. I mean, I like embarrassingly looking back, I think one of my first thoughts was like, cool, I like Mexican food. Like, like nothing related to it, right? But I just didn't know. But back then I didn't have the internet at home. Like I literally had to get an encyclopedia and look up Venezuela to figure out where I was going and what it was all about. And it was crazy. And it's only gotten crazier, which is hard to believe. But yeah, I mean, when I went, so I'm 6'6", and I think I probably weighed like 215 or something when I left. And I mean, and trust me that I looked very skinny at that height and weight. And I came home weighing 175 pounds. And, I was just like sick constantly and malnourished constantly and walking a million miles constantly. And so it was transformational physically as well. I bounced back reasonably fast from that, but it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I wouldn't trade that for anything. It was so hard. And I remember it's 2 years. And I remember one time I was probably in my second week and we were walking down the street and, you don't get to choose who your missionary companion or partner is. And I somehow just often had very difficult situations as far as that went. And I was walking along with this guy who did not like me and was very open about it. And the missionary work was very difficult. And I'm basically an extrovert, but you want to test your extroversion, go knock on doors in a foreign country and tell them about religion. That will push your limits. And I just remember thinking, there's no way on earth I can do 2 years of this. Like, there's no way. Like, this is week 2. I can't even imagine. And like that kind of mental spiral of, all right, I got to pull the plug on this thing. This is crazy. But it was so deeply fulfilling to meet these people and teach things that were very important to me, and see how we were uplifting people in their lives. But it was a view into an entire different universe of how people might be living. Like, I didn't grow up with money, and I would have said like, yeah, we were kind of poor. And probably most people that I knew would agree, like, yeah, you didn't have a lot of money. We were filthy rich and didn't even know it. And having that perspective was amazing. And so, a few things happened, during those 2 years. I mean, one was, that global perspective of what matters in life. And my last, back to a journal entry, like one of my last journal entries in my mission was 6'6" in Venezuela. I'm not buying new clothes there. So and you can't mail me anything because it just got stolen. So by the end of it, I had like one shirt and one pair of pants, and I literally only had three pairs of socks that I would wash in the sink, in between days. I just had nothing. And I was going to another area. I was at a bus station and I had one duffel bag and that was it. And I had a journal entry and it's like, hey, future Josh, you have one duffel bag. You have, one shirt, one pair of pants and 3 socks, and you've never been happier in your life. So rethink when you think you need to buy this giant house and this fancy car and, whatever. I just had like a list of things that I didn't really need. I went ahead and bought some of them anyway. But that perspective was powerful for me for my whole life. The perspective of hard work, which I think I had learned, deeply through sports, but this was a different kind of hard work and stress. And I learned that that moment of like, I can't do this for 2 years. When that happened, I was like, I can't think that way and succeed. And so I switched to kind of a mantra of like, no, I can do anything for 2 years. I can do anything for this day, and then I can do anything for a week, and then I can do anything for a month. And I just reframed that. And when those kinds of thoughts would pop up, I would just remind myself, no, you can do anything. and you have miles to go before you sleep. And I would just, whatever little mantra I could push away those things. And it made me able to deal with hard things. The other thing is, I don't think I had really seen myself as a leader prior to that. I'd been like team captain on some high school teams or whatever, but I just didn't really see myself as a leader. And I got into this thing where I felt very underqualified to be a missionary in a lot of ways. But I ended up in these leadership roles, in like every single leadership role you could have. And I ended up being like the ecclesiastical leader, me, myself, of a tiny little church group up in the Andes in the middle of nowhere for, like 6 months of that time, where it was like all on me. And those were very powerful and formative experiences, and increased my confidence in my ability to be a leader as well.
Do you feel like having a a spiritual or religious component to your life has given you an edge? Maybe not an edge over other people, but has given you something that maybe other people don't have. I know religion, in 2021, when we're recording this, is, people are dropping like flies from religion. People are abandoning God. I think a lot of people are very spiritual.
Yeah.
But as far as religion goes, a lot of people are walking away from that. But do you feel like that is an important component to your life still?
Yeah.
And what would you say to other people that maybe don't believe in God or don't believe in religion? Like, what would you talk to them about?
Yeah. I mean, it's a massively important part of my life. It's a deep well that I draw from, and a thing that I find enormous strength in. And it's hard. Like as a full-time missionary, it was pretty easy to talk about those things, and it's harder in life. And when you're in roles, in a leadership role, like I certainly would not. There are differentials in power in those situations, and so it's certainly not a thing that I would be probably talking about in a work situation generally. But absolutely, like that's a thing that is deeply important to me and deeply valuable, and research shows that it's helpful for your life. And I would say that people have to figure out what matters to them in life, but having something that you believe in and values that you hold deeply is kind of like the platform you build everything else from. And, and I'm very open to people having a variety of things that work for them. But I think if you don't have real values and principles that you live your life by, that you're at a disadvantage, and it's going to be harder to make the important decisions. And I think that psychologically, it's going to be more difficult. Those are the kinds of things that arm you and let you go through very difficult challenges, and are hard to overcome those challenges without. So I'm very comfortable, like if I'm doing executive coaching, telling someone, you've got to figure out what your values are, and you've got to figure out what you believe in, whatever that may be, but you need that foundation to build off of.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Well, I think I cut you off where you were talking about where you were transitioning from the startup to working at Ancestry.
So I started at Ancestry, and I was a web developer, and I was just sitting there writing code all day. And I really like people more than I like code. And I was good at it. It was a thing I could have continued to do as a career easily. But with the psychology background, I really cared about how did people interact with what we built. And there was this whole area of, user experience and user research and trying to understand the customer and how they interacted that appealed to me. And I don't know, I don't even remember how it happened back then, but I just decided that I would do that. It wasn't the purview of my job at all. But I started inviting customers to come into basically come into the lobby, and got a room set up. And I would run like these kind of tests on the ease of use of our website. And I just started doing this, and I started doing it more and more. And eventually people got really interested in it, and I started live streaming it out to the whole company. Like, again, I look back and I'm like, what the heck? I was like a junior web developer. I'm like, hey, entire company, on Wednesdays, I'm going to be live streaming me interviewing our customers as they use our product. You can watch that here. And I just did it. And like, I had like an instant messaging, my instant messenger handle listed. I was like, you can message me during this if you want me to ask questions. And so I started doing that. And, one day the CEO messaged me during a session. He was watching. And I was like, oh, that is very intimidating, but that is pretty exciting. And so he started messaging during, like, regularly watching these things and saying, oh, can you ask about this? I'm curious about that. And then one day I was at my desk. This is Tom Stockham, who I owe also a debt of gratitude to for believing in me. But he just came over and tapped me on the shoulder and was like, hey, do you have a minute? And he just said, you should just do this full time. Like, we really need this. Do you want to just start a department where this is what we do? And I just said, yeah, let's do it. And that's a thing. I think, Russ, to your question of like, I know like a lot of those decisions I haven't really agonized over because there was like a principle I had that like made it so I could make those decisions. Right. And one of those principles was, I'm just always going to get in over my head. I'm always going to head towards deep water. And if it's kind of scary, that's probably a yes. And I really made decisions that way, regularly, career-wise, and just tried to have that confidence that like, I'll figure it out. And it was, I've often gotten myself into water deep enough that I was like, oh boy, and I've often made those decisions and then come home and told my wife, like, Adrian, this is the one where they're going to catch me. This is the one where they're going to figure out that I'm actually have no idea I've gone too far. But then I, experience that for a minute and then be like, no, but I know how to work hard and I know how to learn and I'm just going to figure it out. And so that was one of those. I just jumped at it and said, yeah, let's do it. And so I switched my career from being a web developer into being like a full-time user researcher and doing like user experience design, and worked my way up in that until I was like a director over a larger team. And I loved it. It was super fun. Got to invent things. And I think that's always been an area where I'm the happiest, is when I have kind of like a broad mission of like, just go figure that out. And I can be creative and lead a team that's creative to invent solutions. And so I was at Ancestry for quite a while. I left and I moved almost entirely, honestly, to just go live by my twin brother. I just thought that would be cool. We hadn't lived by each other in a long time. So switched jobs and worked for an investment firm in Washington State, still doing user experience design. But again, like, I don't think I agonized over the decision. It felt like the right thing to do would be to get some new experiences and just have an adventure as a family. My reassurance to my wife was like, look, if it doesn't work out, I'll get a job back in Utah and I'll make them pay for my relocation and we'll just come right back and it'll be fine. Which is eventually what happened. But, we moved to Washington. I worked there for a while, and the company I was working, it was in 2008. So always join an investment firm in just historic market crashes is like the best. Like, maybe I should have agonized over that decision a little more. And so I was at an investment firm during all of that. And it was wild. And they were great to me, but it just was slower moving than I was used to. And I really struggled with like feeling like I wasn't accomplishing that much and feeling kind of bored with it. And so I ended up accepting a job to come back to Ancestry. And it was in a totally different role. It was as a product manager. And I had never done that. And it was running like one of their international products. And again, like my decision on that was I had done the web development side of creating these tech products, and I had done the user experience, like design side of it, but I hadn't done the product management, which is like the business side. And I thought that would be a great thing to add to the skill set. And family and things, moving back to Utah was appealing, but came back to Ancestry and ran product for a while there, and got to learn this whole new skill set. And then I got asked to run the user experience team again, and built up that team from like 4 people to 40 people. And like, honestly, it was just one of the most fun times of my entire career. Just an amazing team making great products. We built the Ancestry DNA product that's used by millions of people, and very fulfilling the way people were like connecting with their family history. And it wasn't unusual that somebody would make a discovery, like while we're doing user research, like they would discover their birth mother or something and just start crying. Super fulfilling. And so it was kind of like a real golden period for me. And then my back exploded. And so I was playing volleyball and basketball, just regularly for fun, really enjoying it. I was 41 or something, and I could still dunk and loved it. And I remember one time I was doing that, and someone said, "Yeah, you can, but do you think you should be doing that?" And I thought, of course I should. And then I was playing in a volleyball tournament, and I hit a ball. Nothing weird at all. Hit it quick, and I landed, and I just collapsed on the ground. Just went down. And I got back up and tried to keep playing, because that's what you do. And I went to block a guy, and I realized that I only jumped off of 1 foot when I blocked him, and like my left leg didn't really do anything. And it's so funny to look back, like, why did I not just stop playing? But both of you know why I didn't stop playing, because you just don't. And I was like, what is happening? But I was just still, we were in the finals. And so there was a play, somebody like rifled a jump serve at me. The great thing about being a mediocre middle blocker in college who's never allowed to touch a ball is that when you go play like a city league game, you're actually one of the best passers on the court now suddenly. And so this guy like rifles a jump serve at me, and I can't get down into like an actual passing position because my leg won't do anything. And I like kind of awkwardly passed this serve, and that was the moment I just walked off the court. Like in the middle of the play, I just turned, I walked off the court, I picked up my bag, and I walked out of the gym, and the ref was like, "Are you calling a timeout?" And I just waved over my shoulder and went out and got in my car and went home. And by the time I got home, which is like a 10-minute drive, my entire left leg was spasming. Like from my hip to my ankle, every muscle in my leg was going crazy. And the pain was insane. And I've had a lot of dumb, painful things in life. It was horrific. And we ended up going into, I ended up going to the Instacare, and they're like, "No, you need to go to the ER." And I went to the ER, and they went in and they did an MRI. And I have a photo of me thinking I was putting on a brave face. My wife took that, but I'm just dying. And they did an MRI on it like right away. And they just said, "Yeah, you have to have surgery." And like my disc, it wasn't just like, "Oh, my back hurts." My disc had blown out and had crushed the nerve in my left leg, had just crushed it. And so I was having a spinal fusion like the next day. And I completely thought, "Oh, this will be fine. This will fix it, and it's gonna be great." Which is how I try to approach things. And it just totally did not. The pain went away, but my leg never fully recovered. So I can't do a calf raise on my left leg at all. That muscle just does not even fire. I walk with like a bit of a limp. It used to be where it's gotten a little better, which is nice. It used to be pretty severe. But I don't really play anymore. I thought that would come back, but that was another one of those moments of Well, I'm still, I'm an older guy, but I'm still an athlete. And then just like, no, you're not at all. And not only that, like you like to picture yourself as like a big, strong person. That's part of your self-image. And you're limping when you walk, and people are like feeling sorry for you. I did not love that period of life. That, I felt like there was like this golden age happening, and then that was just devastating. And at the same time that happened, we changed ownership of the company, and I got a new boss. And I don't speak ill. Like in job interviews, when people speak ill of a boss, it's always like a red flag. I don't care. This guy was awful. Just terrible. Had a terrible boss. And so I already was in this mode where like my whole sense of self had just exploded along with my spine. It was so depressing to walk around. I remember walking to a meeting and seeing my reflection in the window as I was walking into this meeting. And I'm like a vice president of the company, right? And seeing myself limping to the meeting was so psychologically devastating that I turned around and just went back to my office and like declined and just sat at my desk and like stared at a wall. And so that's all going on. And then I have a boss where like I've had the highest reviews every year in this company for like 10 years. It's, like I've always been one of the highest performers, and this guy just hated me and was belittling as a boss too. And I honestly had never experienced that in my career. And to have that come at the same time was very, very difficult. And so the only times in my life, I think, where I've ever struggled with feeling depressed, when I quit playing volleyball, and that was kind of situational and it went away. I didn't have to do anything about it. And then this, where like, what an eye opener it was to understand what so many people go through. I've never been an anxious person. I never really have understood it. And it has felt frustrating to me when people talk about anxiety, because it just doesn't really make sense. Like, well, just don't do that. It seems like that's not a healthy way to look at it. Just stop. And here I am, like driving to work with these feelings of anxiety and depression. And man, did that open up my eyes for how a lot of people experience the world. It kind of felt like my experience in Venezuela and understanding how a lot of people live financially, that this was like such an eye-opener how a lot of people are living emotionally.
What did depression feel like for you? Because that's an area that hits home for me, but everyone experiences it a little different. For some people, it's just a tornado of negativity in their mind. For other people, they just feel sick all the time. Some people have no energy. So it's a combination for some people. Like for you, what was depression?
I felt overwhelmingly sad and just kind of hopeless. I just felt, and that is such a foreign feeling to me. Like, it's just not how I have felt in my life. I've always felt like, honestly, very optimistic and very full of hope. And I just had these feelings of like, nothing's going to work out. It's like, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I can't solve this problem. And just feeling sad and like unspecified sad. Right. And it, yeah, like that. And then feeling anxious, which again, very new for me to feel that way, but like heart rate going up and just feeling kind of like, I can't solve these problems. I'm not good enough. I'm not going to be able to get through this. Man, that like, I hate to even like go back there and think about that. Cause it's just, that was very difficult. And mixed with like, who even am I if I'm like broken this way physically too. Right. And so I felt broken emotionally and physically and yeah, not fun. So big hugs to everyone who deals with that regularly. Like that is a heavy load to carry. I guess, for me, one of the ways, like, so there was a path out of that. And like, I don't want to, like, I'm not going to leave that. That's not how it stayed. And, I was walking around my neighborhood. My foot was constantly in excruciating pain. So there's like the mental, emotional pain that I was feeling, like this loss of identity, and this difficulty just day to day at work was not fun and felt just kind of awful. But I was still in like physical pain. My back didn't hurt, but the nerve pain in my leg, my foot constantly was just saying, "Oh, I feel like something's stabbing me. Let's just send you a signal that you're dying," kind of a thing. So excruciating pain in my foot, nerve pain in my foot all the time. And I had decided that I just couldn't live like that, and that I was gonna, I think it was less of like, this wasn't a logical thing. This was purely emotional. I was like, oh yeah, foot, I'll show you what hurts. And I started walking around my neighborhood barefoot in the street on the asphalt, because my foot would react like I was walking on broken glass. And I just had in my head, like, no, this isn't hurting you, and we're going to do this until you shut up. And like that was so pure emotion. Like I was mad at that feeling. And so I was walking around my block barefoot, just white knuckling it. But just convinced that I was going to retrain my foot, and it wasn't really happening. It was just very painful at first. And I was walking at night because I didn't want my neighbors to see me limping around. And I just had this moment where I had like an epiphany, this thought that was just as clear as could be, that was like, hey, you don't get to decide what happens to you. You don't, largely, but you can decide how you react to it. And that like turned a light back on. And I kept doing my crazy foot, Josh's patented foot therapy. And it worked, by the way. It actually did. Like over time, the pain went down and eventually just didn't hurt at all. And it rarely bothers me. But that epiphany of like, I get to choose how I respond to life situations. I don't get to choose the situations, turned the light back on, emotionally. And things were still hard, but I felt like I used to, like, I'm going to get through this. I'm just going to keep going. And I will figure it out. And there will be a good outcome. And there was, and I just kind of kept going. And the thing with like an injury, like with a nerve, like literally that's a spinal cord injury. There aren't solutions for that. People will give you a lot of great advice, but if there were solutions for that, people would not get paralyzed and all. And the only way that gets better is with time and some luck. And so I just had to adjust. And so it's gotten better. It really has. Here's the thing is, a few years later, I honestly never even think about it. The function of it and everything is not back to where it was. I cannot dunk a basketball anymore. That's also because I got fat. But I want to blame the nerves. But I don't ever think about it. It does not bother me. I am fine with who I am. I am happy with life. And it was really one of those things that you just have to keep going and get through.
Do you regret those experiences? If you had a time machine, would you go back and change things, not go up for that block, not blow your back out? Or do you feel like that added something to your life that was important?
I'm actually terrified of time machine scenarios because I think you have no idea how things interact in your life. You just don't. And so my default answer is I probably would never change anything because I'm happy with life. And the other thing is that I also believe really firmly in how we interpret our experiences is really where the power lies, and really determines an awful lot of what you experience. That there are different lenses you can look at your life through, and they're very equally valid. And, I'm not saying there's no objective truth, but there's a lot of gray area in how you interpret what happens in your life. And it's just kind of, what stories do you tell yourself? And so for me, when I look back at the things like these injuries and challenges and like, tragedies, the story that I tell myself is really one of learning and growing, gaining new abilities to deal with things, being strengthened, not diminished. And so, no, I don't love, I don't love that my leg doesn't work how it used to at all. Like I wish it worked well, but, my brain doesn't work how it used to either. And I think it probably works in a little better way, and my sense of compassion, around these particular kinds of things that people deal with, anxiety and depression, is so much higher than it was before. And like, it's not like I was dismissive of it, but I didn't understand it. And it made me understand. I'm glad I'm not experiencing it now. And if I still were, maybe I would take that time machine, right? But having got to the other side of it, I really value what I learned from it.
So one thing, we've noticed on this podcast is, and this is pretty obvious, but everyone's going through their own journey, but there's always people around them on this journey. It's usually a wife, kids, parents, whoever it is. So while you're going through all these trials and having the successes that you've had, how did your wife and your kids react to all these things? Because I think it's important to understand not just the person we're interviewing's journey, but the other people that are just as much a part of this journey as you. How did they deal with this? What's your wife like? Did she struggle at times? If she did, how did she get through things? How did your kids handle these things, both good and bad?
I've had a lot of career success that I'm grateful for, and that's been wonderful. And my family could not care less, and I love it about them. They're not impressed in the slightest, and and my wife is just the least pretentious human ever, and she is allergic to all pretension, and I love that. And so she's very supportive, and I wouldn't have had the career success that I've had without her. And I also wouldn't have had the balance I've had in life without her, because I think I can get very extreme about throwing myself into things. And I think that work is an easy way to do that. And she's helped me to be, grounded and connected with family, which I think honestly makes you more effective at work rather than being a workaholic. And so I attribute a lot of that success to us as a team. And my ability to go focus on things is also related to, having someone who takes care of some of the other stuff and trying to balance those things out. So yeah, successes have not impressed them at all, and that's great. Incredibly supportive. I'm very adept at explaining away support, though, and so when she would try to be supportive in a situation, I'm pretty good at coming up with an explanation as to why that support doesn't matter, because it's actually this negative way I was seeing it, and so that was a battle. And I think that she just kind of had a point where she was like, well, look, you can decide to let me help and support you, or you can keep doing what you're doing. But I know which one I would choose. And I think there was a choice there where I needed to stop trying to explain away the love and support and accept it. And so unbelievably supportive family. I mean, there's nothing in my life that I care about even 1/1,000,000th as much. Nothing I value as much. And just unbelievably fortunate with the wife I have and the kids I have. And we just have a very, like COVID, I hate to say this, but like the COVID, quarantines and mandatory being stuck together all the time was kind of wonderful for our family. We enjoyed it. We missed the things that we liked to do that weren't kind of on the table necessarily. And we felt, that empathy for people who were struggling and isolated, especially. Like that was very difficult for a lot of people. And I recognize that completely. But because of that support that we have, it was actually kind of a great time for our family. And so, yeah, I think it would have been a lot harder to get through some of the things I've gone through without having them.
Well, I think we have time for one more question. What I was thinking is, What's next for you? Where do you see things going in your life? I know you've had a lot of success with the different business ventures you've been part of. Where do you see yourself going at this point?
It's a good question. I stopped working for a while, thinking that I was going to do kind of a semi-retired lifestyle, and the freedom of that was amazing. But I find I enjoy my job. And I say job, I enjoy my career, my work. I enjoy getting to invent things. I enjoy making products that people use, and hopefully making really good products. But I especially enjoy the team aspect of it. And so I learned that not working wasn't necessarily like that this amazing thing that I had kind of dreamed of, but more that I was missing out on some things I really enjoyed. And so, I'm back and working at a wonderful company, Lucid Press, with wonderful people, and I'm having a good time with it. So long term, I don't know. I thought if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have told you that I'm just going to be doing executive coaching and advising startups, and that's kind of that. I'm not sure that that's it. I don't know that I ever want to retire again. It's as long as I'm working in the right place with the right people, and I can have some balance to my life, I really enjoy it. So that part of what do you do with your life? But the most important stuff to me is really just family and where do I see myself? I don't know. Hopefully, continuing to be heavily involved in my kids' life and with my wife, and we have a great time. So I don't foresee any boredom in my future.
Well, thanks, Josh. This was great. We're glad to have you on the episode, and you have just tons of amazing insights.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh.
It's been fun talking to you guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Passion to Poison. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review. Also tell your friends to subscribe as well.